Hi guys, welcome back to Chess to Matthew. So on this video, I will show you on how to beat the London system. So the set opening start with the moves of d4 and after d5 for black, the white here automatically develop his bishop or even to knight f3 first and after for example knight f6 and bishop f4. This is now the so-called London system. So the antidote of this automatic moves of white is very simple for black, and the black here should play the move c5 to open up some diagonal for his queen and trying to pressure now the center with c takes to d4. And for example, if the white here automatically grab that pawn on c5, for example with d takes c5, because we shall see in this position now that the white here wins a pawn, but after e6 for the black, it actually open some diagonal for the dark bishop of black. For example, after e6, there is now an attack to the c5 from bishop f8. And if the white here defend his extra pawn on c5 with b4, so we shall see in this position now that this pawn is actually defended by b4 pawn and it cannot be captured freely without losing a piece. But the black here can actually pressure now this pawn chain of white by a simple move of a5. Because for example, if the white here will grab this pawn, then the black here can immediately grab the c5 and later on the black here can pressure now the pawn on e5. So after for example a5 for black, and if the white here defend his pawn chain by playing a3, but there is simple a takes b4 for black, and after a takes b4, the black here wins the rook on a8 with a huge material advantage on the board. So going back for example after this position, if the white here plays the London system, the black here should play the move c5 to pressure now the d4, and if the white here grab that pawn, we have e6 here that actually tries to regain back now the pawn deposit of black. And if the white here insists to defend his extra pawn by playing b4, but we have a simple a5. And for example after a3 and after a takes to b4, we shall see on the latter moves that after a takes to b4, the white here loses a rook on a1. So if the white here tries another move, for example after bishop takes b8, capturing now the knight, and for example after rook takes to b8, in which now the rook here was actually placed now to b file rather than to a file, so there is no pressure now on the e file on its position, so the white here can immediately now grab the pawn on b4 by a takes to b4, but there's simple b6 that actually now pressure this c5, because this c5 pawn has two attackers versus one defender. Even though for example he reinforced with queen, for example with queen to d4, there is a simple knight to e4 that puts another attackers to this c5 pawn. So for example on this position, if the white here will play c6 to avoid that pressure, but there is a simple bishop takes to b4 with a check, and again regaining back now the pawn deposit and ruining the pawn structure now on this position. So after for example knight to b2, covering the check from the bishop, but there is a simple knight to b4, adding some pressure to this knight with two attackers, although it was actually well defended. But after for example a3, trying to develop his bishop on this diagonal and putting his king to safety after kingside castling, but there's simple queen f6 The idea here of queen f6 is that, for example, after bishop to d3, there example bishop takes d2, and after knight takes d2, because for example, if the white queen here will grab this bishop, then he will lose his rook on a1. So after knight takes to d2, there is a checkmate after queen takes f2 checkmate, and the black here wins in just 13 moves. So going back, for example, after d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, the London system, we have now an antidote for that system by playing c5, and after d takes c5, e6, putting some pressure to this pawn, and again after b4 we have a simple move of a5, and after a3, a takes b4, and for example after bishop takes b8, rook takes b8, although he maintained, for example after a takes b4, an extra pawn on this position, but there is simple b6. And again, after the latter moves of playing c6, we have a simple move of bishop takes to b4, regaining back the pawn d set, and again rounding this pawn structure of white. So for example, after b6, we shall see in this position now that this pawn was actually been pressured. So if the black here tries another move with c takes to b6, but again there's a simple bishop takes b4 check, and after knight b to d2, queen b6, grabbing a pawn and trying to equalize now the amount of material. But after e3 here, a normal looking move for white, but there's simple bishop c3, and after rook to a3 attacking that bishop, but there's simple queen b2 attacking the rook, and after rook e7, knight to e4, again pressurizing this knight on d2, and after bishop to d3, preparing to kingside castling, but there's simple knight takes to d2, and after knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, and after queen b1 check, queen d1, a forced move because he will lose his rook on h1 if he moves his king, but still it is the same after queen d1, queen takes d1 check, king takes d1, rook b1 check, and after king to e2, rook takes h1, and again the black here has a huge material advantage with extra rook on the board. So again, for example, after d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, the London system, we can actually win here in just 7 moves after c6, because after d takes c5, e6, b4, there is simple a5, and after a3, a takes b4, a takes b4, and rook takes to a1 with a huge material advantage on the board. So that's all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to subscribe.